For over 4 millennia, China was shaped by a succession of powerful dynasties, each leaving a unique mark on history. From the legendary Xia to the last imperial Qing, these rulers built empires, fought epic battles, and pioneered innovations that influenced the world. This is the story of a civilization that endured, evolved, and dominated the course of history like no other. Prehistoric China, spanning roughly from 5000 BCE to 2070 BCE, represents a formative era in the development of one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations. Long before the rise of the legendary Xia Dynasty, China's vast landscapes were home to scattered communities that gradually transitioned from simple hunter-gatherer societies into more complex sedentary cultures. This period laid the foundational social, technological, and cultural structures that would influence Chinese civilization for millennia. The earliest signs of organized settlement during this period are linked to the Neolithic cultures of the Yellow River Basin, often regarded as the cradle of Chinese civilization. Among these, the Yangshao culture, flourishing around 5000 to 3000 BCE, stands out for its distinctive painted pottery, agricultural innovations, and evidence of social organization. Yangshao communities typically cultivated millet as a staple crop, supplemented by beans, hemp, and other grains, reflecting an early mastery of farming techniques. The development of irrigation and primitive tools, such as stone sickles and grinding stones, enabled these communities to sustain larger populations, fostering the growth of permanent villages. Archaeological sites like Banpo, near modern-day Xi'an, reveal well-planned settlements with circular and rectangular houses, communal storage facilities, and sophisticated burial practices, indicating an emerging awareness of social hierarchy and ritual life. Following the Yangshao, the Longshan culture, circa 3000 to 1900 BCE, marked a significant leap in technological and social complexity. Known for its black pottery, often highly polished and meticulously crafted, Longshan culture exhibits evidence of advanced ceramic production that suggests both artistic refinement and functional utility. The Longshan period also demonstrates early forms of social stratification, as indicated by variations in grave goods, with some burials accompanied by elaborate pottery, jade ornaments, and tools, while others contained minimal possessions. This disparity hints at the beginnings of elite classes or chieftains, possibly laying the groundwork for later dynastic rule. Longshan communities were often fortified with rammed earth walls, suggesting heightened concerns over security and intergroup conflict. These fortifications, alongside increasing evidence of weapons such as arrowheads and daggers, hint at the rising importance of organized defense and perhaps the emergence of early warfare. Agriculture during this period was complemented by animal domestication, including pigs, dogs, and later cattle. Settled life and food surplus enabled population growth, leading to the expansion of villages into proto-towns. Trade and cultural exchange likely occurred between communities, facilitated by rivers and primitive roads, spreading innovations in pottery, tools, and ritual practices across regions. The Yellow River, in particular, played a dual role as both a lifeline for agriculture and a challenge due to its frequent and devastating floods, shaping early Chinese understanding of water management, communal labor, and the necessity of coordinated leadership. Religious and ritual practices also began to emerge in prehistoric China, often intertwined with daily life and agriculture. Excavations reveal ritualistic structures, such as altars and ceremonial pits, and evidence of ancestor worship, indicating a deepening spiritual consciousness and reverence for the natural and ancestral world. Jade, in particular, held symbolic importance, often fashioned into ceremonial objects that reflected social status, and spiritual beliefs. These practices foreshadowed the intricate cosmology and ritual traditions that would dominate later Chinese dynasties. By the late Neolithic, around 2070 BCE, these developments culminated in the rise of the Xia culture, traditionally considered China's first dynasty. While direct historical records of the Xia remain sparse and often interwoven with legend, archaeological evidence points to increasingly complex settlements with hierarchical social structures, advanced pottery, bronze experimentation, and large-scale flood control projects. This transition from prehistoric village societies to the early dynastic system illustrates the dynamic interplay between technological innovation, agricultural development, social organization, and ritual practice in shaping the trajectory of Chinese civilization. Prehistoric China, therefore, was not a static or primitive stage, but a vibrant and evolving landscape of human ingenuity. The innovations in agriculture, settlement planning, pottery, metallurgy, and social hierarchy during this era created a durable foundation for the cultural and political achievements of later dynasties. It is a testament to the resilience and creativity of early Chinese communities that, despite environmental challenges and limited technology, they established patterns of life, labor, and belief that would resonate through millennia of Chinese history. The Xia Dynasty, traditionally dated from around 2070 to 1600 BCE, occupies a critical place in Chinese history as the first dynasty chronicled in ancient texts. While some debate persists over its historical versus legendary status due to limited archaeological evidence, the Xia Dynasty represents the transition from prehistoric cultures to early dynastic rule, marking the emergence of hereditary monarchy, centralized authority, and organized state structures. Its legacy, preserved in later historical records, such as the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian and the Bamboo Annals, laid the foundations for the political and cultural norms that would define Chinese civilization for centuries. According to tradition, the Xia Dynasty was founded by Yu the Great, a legendary figure renowned for his wisdom, moral integrity, and engineering genius. Yu is credited with taming the floods of the Yellow River, a recurring threat to early Chinese settlements, through large-scale irrigation and flood control projects. His efforts not only secured arable land and food production, but also established the principle that a ruler's legitimacy depended on their ability to manage nature and protect the people. Yu's success in controlling the river marked a shift from tribal leadership to dynastic governance as he passed authority to his son, Qi, thereby instituting hereditary monarchy for the first time in Chinese history. Archaeological research suggests that the Xia Dynasty evolves from the preceding Longshan culture, particularly in the central plains along the Yellow River. Sites such as Early Tu in Henan province are often associated with the Xia, providing evidence of urbanization, advanced bronze technology, and social stratification. Early Tu reveals large palace-like structures, workshops, and residential areas, indicating the emergence of a complex society with administrative control over labor and resources. Bronze casting, which began in this period, reflects not only technological innovation, but also the role of metal objects in ceremonial and political life. Ritual vessels, weapons, and tools were often elaborately decorated, signifying both practical utility and symbolic authority. The Xia political system was hierarchical, with the king at the apex, supported by regional chieftains or nobles who administered surrounding territories. This centralization allowed for coordinated construction projects, defense against external threats, and the management of agricultural production. It also facilitated the development of early bureaucratic practices, such as record-keeping and taxation. Though written records remain scarce, the dynasty's emphasis on hereditary rule reinforced the notion that authority was divinely sanctioned, a concept that would profoundly influence later Chinese dynasties. Economically, the Xia dynasty relied heavily on agriculture, with millet, wheat, and rice forming the staple diet, supplemented by domesticated animals such as pigs, cattle, and dogs. Irrigation systems and flood control projects enabled more stable harvests, while advances in pottery and storage techniques ensured food security. Artisans produced fine ceramics, jade ornaments, and early bronze implements, indicating both specialization of labor and the emergence of a class of skilled craftsmen. Trade likely occurred between Xia settlements and neighboring regions, promoting cultural exchange and the dissemination of technological innovations. Religion and ritual played a central role in Xia society. Ancestor worship and reverence for natural forces were integral to political legitimacy and social cohesion. Excavations of tombs and ceremonial sites reveal elaborate burial practices, including jade artifacts, pottery, and ritual vessels, reflecting the belief in an afterlife and the importance of maintaining harmony between the living and the dead. Kings and elites used these rituals to assert power, demonstrate wealth, and reinforce their divine mandate to rule. The fall of the Xia Dynasty, traditionally attributed to around 1600 BCE, is linked to the rise of the Shang Dynasty. According to historical texts, the last Xia ruler, Zhou, was a tyrant whose mismanagement and cruelty provoked rebellion. The Shang, led by Tang, overthrew Zhou, ushering in a new era of political consolidation and cultural development. While the exact historical accuracy of these accounts is debated, the narrative underscores a recurring theme in Chinese historiography: the moral responsibility of rulers and the cyclical nature of dynastic rise and fall. The significance of the Xia dynasty extends beyond its historical existence. It represents the crystallization of ideas that would shape Chinese civilization, including centralized governance, hereditary rule, the moral obligations of kings, flood management, agricultural innovation, and ritualized social order. The Xia's achievements, though often overshadowed by the more extensively documented Shang and Zhou dynasties, established patterns of political authority, technological advancement, and cultural continuity that endured for millennia. In essence, the Xia dynasty bridges the prehistoric and historical periods of China, transforming scattered communities into organized states capable of monumental engineering, social hierarchy, and ritual sophistication. Whether viewed through the lens of legend or archaeology, the Xia dynasty remains a symbol of early Chinese ingenuity, governance, and the enduring aspiration to harmonize human society with the natural world. A legacy that resonates throughout the history of China. The Shang dynasty, traditionally dated from around 1600 to 1046 BCE, represents the first historically confirmed dynasty of China, providing clear archaeological and written evidence of an organized state. Rising after the legendary Xia dynasty, the Shang established political, social, and cultural frameworks that shaped the development of Chinese civilization. Centered along the fertile plains of the Yellow River, the Shang dynasty is best known for its advanced bronze technology, the earliest known form of Chinese writing, and highly stratified society, reflecting a civilization capable of monumental achievements in governance, religion, and the arts. Archaeological evidence, particularly from sites such as Anyang in Henan province, the dynasty's last capital, reveals sophisticated urban planning. Shang cities were often fortified with rammed earth walls and strategically located near rivers for water, agriculture, and trade. Within these cities, royal palaces, workshops, residential districts, and ceremonial areas were organized with remarkable planning, indicating centralized authority and administrative oversight. The Shang kings ruled not only as political leaders, but also as religious figures, mediating between the human and spiritual realms and legitimizing their rule through ritual and divination. The political structure of the Shang dynasty was hierarchical and highly centralized. The king, or Di, was the ultimate authority, controlling armies, adjudicating disputes, and overseeing religious ceremonies. Regional lords or nobles administered smaller territories on behalf of the king, forming a feudal-like system that integrated military, economic, and ritual responsibilities. This hierarchy facilitated coordinated construction projects, defense, and agricultural management, ensuring that surplus resources supported both the elite and large-scale urban populations. The Shang economy was primarily agricultural, relying on millet, wheat, barley, and rice cultivation. Advanced irrigation techniques and flood management, refined from earlier practices in the Xia Dynasty, enabled consistent harvests, supporting growing populations. Domesticated animals, such as pigs, cattle, and dogs, supplemented the diet, while hunting and fishing provided additional protein sources. Trade networks developed both locally and regionally, facilitating the exchange of jade, bronze, pottery, and other luxury goods, which reinforced social hierarchy and wealth accumulation. Bronze technology reached its zenith during the Shang dynasty, transforming both daily life and ceremonial practices. Artisans produced highly intricate ritual vessels, weapons, and tools using sophisticated casting techniques. Bronze items, often adorned with elaborate motifs, served not only practical purposes, but also symbolized political authority and spiritual connection. Rituals involving bronze vessels, particularly for ancestor worship, were central to Shang society. These ceremonies reinforced the king's divine mandate and connected the living with their ancestors, who were believed to influence prosperity, fertility, and military success. Religion and ritual permeated Shang life. Ancestor worship was central, with elaborate tombs, offerings, and ritual bronzes evidencing deep respect for familial and spiritual connections. Divination, particularly through oracle bones, tortoiseshells, or ox scapulae inscribed with questions for the ancestors, provides the earliest known form of Chinese writing. These inscriptions reveal concerns about agriculture, warfare, hunting, childbirth, and royal affairs, offering invaluable insight into the political, religious, and social dynamics of the time. The king acted as the chief intermediary between heaven, ancestors, and the people, reflecting a society where spiritual and temporal authority were inseparable. Shang society was highly stratified, with a clear division between royalty, nobles, artisans, farmers, and slaves. Royal and noble families controlled land and resources, wielding political, military, and ritual authority. Skilled artisans and craftsmen supported the elite by producing bronze, jade, and pottery, while the majority of the population engaged in agriculture or labor-intensive projects. Slaves, often captured during warfare, performed manual labor and served in royal households, illustrating the inequality embedded in the societal structure. Military power was integral to Shang rule. The dynasty maintained professional armies equipped with bronze weapons, chariots, and fortifications to defend territories and expand influence. Warfare was frequent, both to suppress internal revolts and to assert dominance over neighboring regions. The ability to mobilize resources, command armies, and maintain fortified cities contributed to the Shang's longevity and regional power. The fall of the Shang dynasty around 1046 BCE, traditionally attributed to the Zhou conquest, marked the end of the first fully documented era of Chinese civilization. The Zhou justified their takeover through the concept of the mandate of heaven, claiming that the Shang had become corrupt and lost divine favor. While the Zhou established a new dynasty, the cultural, technological, and ritual innovations of the Shang persisted, providing a blueprint for subsequent dynasties. The Shang dynasty's significance lies in its transformation of prehistoric and early dynastic practices into a structured, literate, and technologically advanced civilization. Its mastery of bronze, urban planning, divination, ancestor worship, and hierarchical governance set enduring standards for Chinese society. By establishing the first verifiable written records, the Shang dynasty ensured that its culture, beliefs, and history could influence generations long after its decline, securing its place as a cornerstone of Chinese civilization. The Zhou dynasty, lasting from 1046 to 256 BCE, stands as the longest ruling dynasty in Chinese history and one of the most influential periods in shaping China's political philosophy, social structure, and cultural identity. Emerging after the fall of the Shang dynasty, the Zhou introduced ideas that would define Chinese civilization for over 2,000 years, including the concept of the mandate of heaven, feudal governance, and the philosophical traditions that still influence the modern world. The Zhou overthrow of the Shang was justified through a powerful moral doctrine known as the mandate of heaven. This belief claimed that heaven granted rulers the right to govern based on virtue and justice, not simply by hereditary birth. When a ruler became corrupt or oppressive, heaven would withdraw its mandate, allowing rebellion and dynastic change to be morally justified. This revolutionary idea created a lasting political cycle in Chinese history where natural disasters, famine, or military defeat were interpreted as signs that a dynasty had lost divine favor. Unlike the Shang, whose kings ruled primarily as religious figures, the Zhou kings framed themselves as moral guardians of the people. In its early phase, known as the Western Zhou, 1046 to 771 BCE, the dynasty ruled through a feudal system. The king granted lands to loyal nobles, relatives, and military allies who governed these territories as vassals. In exchange, they provided military support and tribute to the royal court. This decentralized model helped the Zhou rapidly consolidate power across vast territories, but it also planted the seeds of future fragmentation. Over time, these noble families grew increasingly independent, weakening central authority. By 771 BCE, external invasions and internal revolts forced the Zhou capital eastward, beginning the Eastern Zhou period. This era was marked by political decline and nearly constant warfare among rival states. The Eastern Zhou is traditionally divided into the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, two ages defined by military conflict, shifting alliances, and the collapse of central royal power. While the Zhou king remained a symbolic ruler, real authority rested with powerful regional warlords competing for dominance. Despite its political weakening, the Zhou era became the golden age of Chinese philosophy and intellectual development. Amid chaos and instability, thinkers sought solutions for restoring order to society. Confucius emerged during the late Spring and Autumn period, advocating moral governance, social harmony, respect for tradition, and filial piety. At the same time, Taoism emphasized harmony with nature and effortless balance, while legalism promoted strict laws and harsh discipline as the foundation of state power. These competing schools of thought transformed China intellectually, shaping governance, ethics, and culture for centuries. Economically and socially, the Zhou witnessed significant transformation. Iron tools replaced bronze in agriculture and warfare, allowing for expanded farming, population growth, and improved productivity. Large irrigation systems supported rice and grain cultivation, while trade networks expanded between states. Cities grew into major political, military, and commercial centers, accelerating social mobility and weakening old aristocratic power structures. The Zhou military evolved rapidly during this long dynasty. Chariots initially dominated warfare, but later gave way to massive infantry armies and cavalry. Advanced weapons, fortifications, and battlefield strategies transformed Chinese warfare into large-scale, organized conflict. The constant struggle between rival states eventually led to the rise of powerful kingdoms such as Qin, Chu, Zhao, Wei, and Han. By 256 BCE, the Zhou dynasty finally collapsed when the powerful state of Qin extinguished the last Zhou king. Though politically defeated, the Zhou left behind an unmatched legacy. Its ideas of moral authority, philosophical inquiry, feudal order, and cultural unity became the foundation upon which all future Chinese dynasties were built. The Zhou dynasty was more than a ruling house. It was the forge of Chinese civilization itself. Through war, philosophy, reform, and transformation, it shaped China's identity as a moral, intellectual, and political civilization that continues to endure to this day. The Qin dynasty, though lasting only from 221 to 206 BCE, stands as one of the most transformative periods in Chinese history. In just 15 years, the Qin reshaped China from a collection of warring states into a unified imperial system. This short-lived dynasty laid down the political and administrative foundations of the Chinese Empire that would endure for over 2,000 years. The Qin state rose to power during the final phase of the Warring States period. Under the leadership of its ruler Ying, Qin defeated all rival kingdoms one by one through superior military organization, strict discipline, and legalist reforms. In 221 BCE, Ying proclaimed himself Qin Shi Huang, meaning First Emperor of Qin, declaring the birth of the first unified Chinese empire. For the first time, China was ruled as a single, centralized state under one absolute monarch. Qin Shi Huang implemented sweeping reforms to eliminate the old feudal order. Noble families lost their hereditary lands and privileges, replaced by a centralized bureaucracy where officials were appointed based on merit and loyalty to the state. The empire was divided into administrative districts governed directly by imperial officials. This system strengthened central control and became the model for all future Chinese governments. Standardization was one of the Qin's most powerful tools of unity. The emperor ordered the standardization of written script, currency, weights and measures, and even the width of cart axles. These reforms allowed trade, communication, and administration to function smoothly across vast distances and diverse populations. What had once been divided culturally and politically was now integrated under a single system. Massive construction projects defined the Qin era. The Great Wall was expanded and linked from earlier regional fortifications to defend against northern nomadic invasions. Huge road networks connected distant regions to the capital, enabling fast troop movement and efficient governance. The most famous construction was the emperor's vast mausoleum, guarded by the terracotta army. Thousands of life-sized clay soldiers built to protect him in the afterlife. These achievements, however, came at an enormous human cost, as forced labor and brutal working conditions caused widespread suffering. The Qin governed through legalism, a philosophy based on strict laws, harsh punishments, and absolute obedience to the state. Dissent was crushed without mercy. One of the most infamous actions of Qin Shi Huang was the burning of books and execution of scholars, aimed at eliminating intellectual opposition and enforcing ideological unity. While these measures strengthened control in the short term, they also bred deep resentment among the people. After Qin Shi Huang's death in 210 BCE, the empire rapidly collapsed. Weak successors, court corruption, economic strain, and widespread revolts shattered central authority. Peasant uprisings erupted across the empire, and rebel leaders soon challenged Qin rule. By 206 BCE, the dynasty had fallen, replaced by the rising Han Dynasty. Despite its brief existence, the Qin dynasty permanently altered the course of Chinese history. It created the idea of a unified Chinese empire, established centralized governance, standardized systems essential to national unity, and proved that a single ruler could control all of China. The Qin showed both the immense power of absolute authority and the danger of ruling through fear alone. Its legacy became the blueprint, both successful and cautionary, for every dynasty that followed. The Han Dynasty, ruling from 206 BCE to 220 CE, stands as one of the greatest and most influential empires in Chinese history. Emerging from the ashes of the short-lived Qin dynasty, the Han transformed China into a stable, prosperous, and culturally unified civilization whose legacy still defines Chinese identity today. So powerful was its influence that even now, the majority ethnic group of China calls itself the Han people. The dynasty was founded by Liu Bang, a former peasant and minor official who rose through rebellion during the collapse of the Qin. After defeating rival warlords, he became Emperor Gaozu of Han and established a more balanced system of governance. Learning from the harsh failures of the Qin, the Han combined legalist efficiency with Confucian morality. While keeping strong centralized authority, the Han softened laws, reduced punishments, and promoted Confucianism as the official state ideology. This blend created a government that was firm yet humane, restoring public trust and stability. Under the Han, China experienced a golden age of expansion, trade, and innovation. The empire pushed its borders deep into Central Asia, Korea, and northern Vietnam. This expansion opened the legendary Silk Road, transforming China into a global trading power. Silk, jade, spices, and ceramics flowed westward, while horses, glass, and precious metals entered China from distant lands. This exchange did not only move goods, it carried ideas, technologies, and cultures across continents. The Han administrative system was one of its greatest achievements. Officials were selected based on learning and merit rather than noble birth, laying the foundation for the later imperial examination system. This created a powerful scholar official class that governed the empire with education and competence. Provincial administrations allowed the emperor to control vast territories efficiently while maintaining law and order. Major scientific and technological breakthroughs defined the Han era. Paper was invented, revolutionizing record-keeping and education. Advances were made in astronomy, medicine, metallurgy, and engineering. The seismograph was developed to detect earthquakes, while iron production, water-powered mills, and advanced irrigation systems greatly boosted the economy and agriculture. These innovations strengthened both the state and everyday life. Despite its greatness, the Han Dynasty eventually faced serious internal problems. Corruption weakened the royal court, powerful landowners dominated the countryside, and heavy taxes burdened peasants. Natural disasters, famines, and inequality led to massive uprisings such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. At the same time, rival warlords gained power over weakened imperial authority. In 220 CE, the last Han emperor was forced to abdicate, and China fractured into rival kingdoms, beginning the Age of the Three Kingdoms. Though the dynasty fell politically, its cultural influence never disappeared. The Han Dynasty shaped China's identity as a unified, scholarly, and world-connected civilization. Its systems of government, education, trade, and technology became permanent pillars of Chinese society. Even centuries after its fall, future dynasties would rule in its image, making the Han not just a dynasty, but the true foundation of imperial China. The Three Kingdoms period, lasting from 220 to 280 CE, stands as one of the most dramatic and legendary eras in Chinese history. Following the collapse of the mighty Han Dynasty, China fractured into three rival states, Wei, Shu, and Wu, each struggling for dominance in a time defined by constant warfare, political intrigue, and heroic ambition. Though brief in duration, this age left a lasting mark on Chinese culture, literature, and national memory. The state of Wei emerged in northern China under the powerful warlord Cao Cao, who reunified much of the Han heartland through military genius and strict administration. After his death, his son Cao Pi formally ended the Han Dynasty in 220 CE and declared himself Emperor of Wei. In the southwest, Liu Bei established the Kingdom of Shu, claiming direct descent from the Han royal family and presenting himself as the rightful heir to imperial legitimacy. Meanwhile, the southeastern regions fell under the control of Sun Quan, who founded the Kingdom of Wu, commanding China's most powerful naval forces. Warfare dominated this era, marked by legendary battles that reshaped the balance of power. One of the most famous was the Battle of Red Cliffs, where the allied forces of Shu and Wu defeated Cao Cao's massive northern army through clever strategy and fire attacks. This decisive battle prevented Wei from conquering southern China and permanently divided the empire into three separate powers. Despite constant conflict, the Three Kingdoms period also produced some of the most brilliant minds and military leaders in Chinese history. Zhuge Liang, the legendary strategist of Shu, became a symbol of wisdom, loyalty, and genius. Generals such as Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhou Yu, and Sima Yi became icons of courage, intelligence, and ambition. Their rivalries and exploits would later be immortalized in the classic novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, blending history with legend into one of the most influential works of Chinese literature. Politically, however, none of the Three Kingdoms achieved lasting stability. Court intrigues, betrayals, and shifting alliances weakened all sides. Over time, the Wei state fell under the control of the powerful Sima family. In 265 CE, Sima Yan seized the throne and founded the Qing Dynasty. Within a few years, he conquered Shu and then Wu, reunifying China by 280 CE. The Three Kingdoms period remains unforgettable, not because of its duration, but because of its dramatic intensity. It was an age of shattered unity, heroic warfare, strategic brilliance, and deep political ambition. Its warriors and thinkers became timeless symbols of loyalty, betrayal, wisdom, and power, ensuring that the spirit of the Three Kingdoms would live on forever in Chinese history and culture. The Qing Dynasty, ruling from 265 to 420 CE, emerged from the turbulent aftermath of the Three Kingdoms period and briefly reunited China under a single imperial authority. Founded by the powerful Sima family, The Jin attempted to restore stability after decades of relentless warfare. Yet despite its promising beginning, the dynasty soon descended into internal conflict, fragmentation, and foreign invasions, making it one of the most unstable yet historically significant eras of imperial China. The Qin dynasty began when Sima Yan, grandson of the famous strategist Sima Yi, seized the throne of the Wei state in 265 CE and declared himself Emperor Wu of Qin. Within 15 years, his forces conquered the rival kingdoms of Shu and Wu, finally reunifying China in 280 CE. For the first time since the fall of the Han, the empire stood whole again. This reunification brought a brief period of peace and economic recovery, as war-torn lands began to heal and trade resumed across the empire. However, the Qin government was deeply flawed from within. Emperor Wu distributed large territories and military power to his relatives in an attempt to secure loyalty. Instead, this policy triggered violent power struggles known as the War of the Eight Princes. Between 291 and 306 CE, members of the imperial family fought devastating civil wars for control of the court. These conflicts destroyed central authority, weakened the economy, and left the empire vulnerable to external threats. As Qin power collapsed internally, non-Han nomadic groups from the north, known collectively as the Five Barbarians, invaded and overran large portions of northern China. In 311 CE, the Qin capital at Luoyang was captured, followed by the fall of Chang'an in 316 CE. The imperial court fled south, and northern China fell under the rule of various non-Han states in a chaotic period later called the 16 Kingdoms. This collapse marked the division of the Qin dynasty into two phases. The Western Qin, 265 to 316 CE, which ruled a unified China for only a short time, and the Eastern Qin, 317 to 420 CE, which governed from the southern capital at Jiankang, modern Nanjing. While the Eastern Qin managed to survive for over a century, it never regained control over northern China. Instead, it relied on fragile alliances with powerful aristocratic families who dominated politics and weakened imperial authority. Despite political instability, the Qin era witnessed important cultural and intellectual developments. Confucianism remained influential, but Taoist philosophy gained new popularity among intellectual elites seeking spiritual escape from political chaos. Literature, poetry, and calligraphy flourished, with refined artistic expression becoming a defining feature of elite life. Buddhism also expanded rapidly during this period, spreading across both northern and southern China and reshaping Chinese religious life. The Qin military struggled to defend its borders against constant threats from the north. Repeated campaigns failed to reunify the empire, and internal corruption further undermined the dynasty. By 420 CE, the Eastern Qin was exhausted by court intrigues and military weakness. A powerful general forced the last Qin emperor to abdicate, ending the dynasty and beginning the era known as the Southern and Northern Dynasties. The Qin dynasty stands as a tragic bridge between unity and division in Chinese history. It briefly restored imperial rule after long chaos, but quickly collapsed under internal ambition and external invasion. Yet even in failure, the Qin helped shape China's cultural identity, preserving scholarship, philosophy, and artistic traditions through one of the darkest ages of political disunity. The Southern and Northern Dynasties period, lasting from 420 to 589 CE, was an age of deep political division but remarkable cultural transformation in Chinese history. After the collapse of the Qing Dynasty, China split into rival regimes, a series of Chinese-led dynasties ruling the south and non-Han or mixed ethnic dynasties controlling the north. For nearly 170 years, the country remained divided, shaped by constant warfare, migration, and cultural blending. In the south, power passed through four short-lived dynasties: the Liu Song, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chen. These southern states were dominated by aristocratic families and governed from capitals near modern Nanjing. Though politically weaker and often unstable, the southern dynasties became centers of culture, literature, and refined court life. Poetry, calligraphy, and painting reached new artistic heights as scholars and nobles sought elegance and spiritual escape from political uncertainty. In the north, a succession of powerful non-Han dynasties ruled, the most important being the Northern Wei. Founded by the Xianbei people, the Northern Wei gradually adopted Chinese culture, language, and administrative practices in a process known as Sinicization. This deliberate transformation strengthened their rule and helped preserve Chinese traditions during a time of foreign dominance. The Northern Wei later split into Eastern and Western Wei, followed by the Northern Qi and Northern Zhou dynasties. One of the most significant developments of this era was the explosive spread of Buddhism. Both northern and southern rulers supported Buddhist temples, monasteries, and cave shrines. Monumental religious art flourished at sites such as the Longmen and Yungang grottos, where thousands of stone Buddha statues were carved into cliffs. Buddhism offered comfort during this violent age and became deeply rooted in Chinese spiritual life. Economically, southern China grew rapidly as waves of refugees fled from northern wars. Advanced farming, irrigation, and trade networks transformed the Yangtze River region into China's new economic heartland. This shift permanently changed the geographic balance of Chinese civilization, making the South a lasting center of wealth and population. Militarily, the era was marked by constant conflict between North and South, yet neither side achieved lasting dominance until the late 6th century. In the North, the Northern Zhou laid the groundwork for reunification by strengthening central authority and reforming the army. In 589 CE, the Xia Dynasty finally conquered the southern Qin Dynasty and reunified China. The southern and northern dynasties ended not as a failure, but as a powerful age of cultural fusion, religious transformation, and regional growth, an era that reshaped China in preparation for its next great imperial resurgence. The Xia Dynasty, though brief in duration from 581 to 618 CE, stands as one of the most decisive turning points in Chinese history. After nearly 3 centuries of political division during the southern and northern dynasties, the Xia restored China's unity and laid the essential foundations for the golden age that would follow under the Tang dynasty. In just a few decades, the Xia transformed a fractured land into a centralized imperial state once again. The dynasty was founded by Yang Jian, a powerful general of the northern Zhou, who seized the throne in 581 CE and declared himself Emperor Wen of Xia. A disciplined and practical ruler, Emperor Wen focused on rebuilding China after centuries of war. He re-established strong central authority, weakened aristocratic power, and reformed the bureaucracy using Confucian principles blended with legalist efficiency. These reforms created a stable and orderly government that restored confidence in imperial rule. One of the Xia's greatest achievements was the reunification of China. In 589 CE, Xia armies marched south and conquered the Qin dynasty, ending nearly 300 years of north-south division. This reunification brought political stability, revived trade between regions, and reunited China's cultural and economic heartlands under one ruler for the first time since the Han Dynasty. The Sui also carried out massive engineering projects that reshaped China's future. The greatest of these was the Grand Canal, a monumental waterway system linking the Yellow River in the north with the Yangtze River in the south. This canal allowed grain, troops, and goods to move efficiently across the empire, strengthening the capital and integrating China's regional economies. The Grand Canal became one of the most important transportation arteries in Chinese history and remains in use today. However, these magnificent achievements came at a terrible human cost. Millions of peasants were conscripted into forced labor to build the canal, roads, defensive walls, and palaces. Heavy taxes and brutal working conditions exhausted the population and planted the seeds of rebellion. Though the state grew stronger on the surface, suffering spread beneath it. After Emperor Wen's death, his son Yang Guang ascended the throne as Emperor Yang. Unlike his father, Emperor Yang ruled with extravagance and ambition. He expanded the Grand Canal even further, built luxurious palaces, and launched massive military campaigns against the Korean kingdom of Goguryeo. These invasions ended in disastrous defeat, draining the empire's treasury and destroying the morale of its armies. As economic pressure and military failure mounted, peasant revolts erupted across the empire. Bandit leaders, rebels, and former generals all rose against Sui authority. By 617 CE, rebellion had reached the capital. Despite its tragic end, the Sui dynasty's historical importance is immense. It reunited China, rebuilt imperial administration, standardized laws and land systems, revived Confucian governance, and created infrastructure that powered China's next great golden age. The Tang dynasty inherited the Sui's political framework, canal system, and centralized state, and turned them into one of the most brilliant civilizations in world history. The Sui dynasty proved that reunification was possible, but also that greatness built on suffering could not last. Its rise was swift, its fall was violent, yet its legacy shaped the destiny of imperial China for centuries to come. The Tang dynasty, ruling from 618 to 907 CE, is widely regarded as the golden age of imperial China, a period of unmatched cultural brilliance, political strength, economic prosperity, and international influence. Built upon the foundations laid by the Sui dynasty, the Tang transformed China into the most advanced and cosmopolitan civilization of its time, admired and emulated across Asia. The dynasty was founded by Yuan, who became Emperor Gaozu after overthrowing the collapsing Sui regime in 618 CE. However, it was his son, Emperor Taizong, who truly shaped the greatness of the Tang. A visionary ruler and brilliant military commander, Taizong expanded China's borders deep into Central Asia, defeated powerful nomadic rivals, and stabilized internal administration. Under his rule, the Tang perfected a strong centralized system based on Confucian ideals, balanced governance, and merit-based official appointments. The Tang administrative system became a model for later dynasties. Officials were selected through imperial examinations based on education and moral character rather than noble birth alone. This created a powerful scholar official class, loyal to the state and skilled in governance. The legal system was standardized, taxes were reorganized, and land distribution was regulated under the equal field system, ensuring economic stability and limiting aristocratic domination. The Tang capital, Chang'an, became the largest and most magnificent city in the world. A true global metropolis, it welcomed merchants, scholars, diplomats, and travelers from Persia, Central Asia, India, Arabia, Korea, and Japan. Through the Silk Road, the Tang Empire connected China directly to the Middle East and Europe. Goods such as silk, tea, porcelain, spices, and precious metals flowed across continents, making the Tang Dynasty a central hub of global trade. Despite its greatness, the Tang Dynasty eventually declined. Court corruption weakened the government, powerful regional generals gained independence, and economic pressures grew. The devastating An Lushan Rebellion, 755 to 763 CE, shattered imperial authority, killing millions and permanently weakening central control. Though the Tang survived for another century, it never fully recovered its former strength. By 907 CE, internal revolts and warlord dominance brought the Tang Dynasty to an end. China once again fractured into rival states, entering the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. The Tang Dynasty left behind a legacy of cultural genius, political innovation, and global influence unmatched in Chinese history. It defined China as a confident, outward-looking civilization and set standards in art, governance, and international relations that would inspire generations to come. Even today, the Tang era is remembered as the height of China's classical civilization. Despite its greatness, the Tang Dynasty eventually declined. Court corruption weakened the government, powerful regional generals gained independence, and economic pressures grew. The devastating An Lushan Rebellion, 755 to 763 CE, shattered imperial authority, killing millions and permanently weakening central control. Though the Tang survived for another century, it never fully recovered its former strength. By 907 CE, internal revolts and warlord dominance brought the Tang Dynasty to an end. China once again fractured into rival states, entering the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. The Tang Dynasty left behind a legacy of cultural genius, political innovation, and global influence unmatched in Chinese history. It defined China as a confident, outward-looking civilization and set standards in art, governance, and international relations that would inspire generations to come. Even today, the Tang era is remembered as the height of China's classical civilization. The 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, lasting from 907 to 960 CE, was an age of political chaos, rapid regime changes, and regional division that followed the collapse of the mighty Tang Dynasty. Though often remembered as a dark and unstable chapter in Chinese history, this era played a crucial transitional role in reshaping China's political structure, economy, and regional power balance, preparing the ground for the rise of the Song Dynasty. With the fall of the Tang in 907 CE, central authority vanished almost overnight. Northern China became the stage for a rapid succession of short-lived dynasties known collectively as the 5 Dynasties. The later Liang, later Tang, later Jin, later Han, and later Zhou. These regimes rose and fell in quick succession, often through violent coups, betrayals, and military takeovers. Emperors ruled briefly, only to be overthrown by their own generals, creating a cycle of instability that left the North exhausted by warfare and political uncertainty. While the North was trapped in constant power struggles, southern China fragmented into a collection of independent regional states known as the 10 Kingdoms. These included powerful realms such as Wu, Wuye, Min, Chu, Southern Tang, and Southern Han. Unlike the violent chaos of the North, many of these southern kingdoms experienced relative peace, economic growth, and cultural progress. protected by geography and distance from northern battlefields. Southern China became a major center of trade, agriculture, and urban expansion. This era marked a permanent economic shift in Chinese history. The Yangtze River region and southern coastal provinces grew into China's strongest economic zones. Advanced rice cultivation, irrigation networks, sea trade, and merchant activity transformed the south into a wealthy commercial hub. Cities flourished, markets expanded, and maritime trade connected China more actively with Southeast Asia and the wider world. Despite political fragmentation, culture and learning did not disappear. Confucian scholarship survived in local courts. Literature continued to develop, and Buddhism remained deeply influential. Art, landscape painting, ceramics, and religious architecture evolved quietly, laying artistic foundations for the Song era. Meanwhile, regional rulers experimented with new administrative systems outside the shadow of an all-powerful empire. Militarily, the Five Dynasties period was dominated by warlords who commanded private armies and controlled strategic territories. Loyalty shifted constantly, and power was maintained by force rather than legitimacy. However, one important change emerged from this chaos: the gradual weakening of the old aristocratic families and the rise of professional soldiers and civil administrators as the true pillars of power. By the mid-10th century, one northern state began to restore order. The later Zhou, under Emperor Shizong, strengthened central authority, disciplined the military, and laid serious groundwork for national reunification. When the powerful general Zhou Guangyin seized the throne in 960 CE, he founded the Song Dynasty and peacefully absorbed most rival states, ending half a century of fragmentation. The Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period was an era of division but not decay. It reshaped China's political geography, shifted its economic heart to the south, weakened warlord aristocracies, and quietly prepared the foundations for one of China's most sophisticated civilizations. Out of chaos emerged transformation, and from fragmentation rose the Song Dynasty's world of innovation, trade, and learning. The Song Dynasty, ruling from 960 to 1279 CE, was one of the most advanced and intellectually vibrant periods in Chinese history. Although militarily weaker than some earlier empires, the Song transformed China into the world's most sophisticated society in science, technology, economy, culture, and governance. It was an age where knowledge, innovation, and commerce reshaped civilization itself. The dynasty was founded in 960 CE by Zhou Guangyin, a military general who seized power peacefully and became Emperor Taizu of Song. Learning from the chaos of the Five Dynasties period, he moved quickly to reduce the power of regional warlords and bring the army firmly under civilian control. This decision created long-term political stability, but also weakened China's military strength. The Song government became highly centralized and bureaucratic, built upon Confucian ideals and a powerful merit-based civil service examination system. The Song economy became the most advanced in the medieval world. Agriculture was transformed by new irrigation methods and the widespread cultivation of fast-ripening rice, leading to explosive population growth. Cities expanded rapidly, creating a strong urban middle class of merchants, craftsmen, and professionals. Trade flourished across land and sea. Song China used paper money on a large scale for the first time in world history, revolutionizing commerce and finance. Markets operated day and night, and merchant ships carried Chinese goods across Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean. Technological and scientific innovation defined the Song era. Gunpowder was weaponized for warfare, including bombs, rockets, and early firearms. The magnetic compass transformed navigation and maritime trade. Printing advanced with movable type, spreading books and education widely throughout society. Engineering feats, advanced metallurgy, hydraulic systems, and mechanical clocks placed Song China centuries ahead of the rest of the world in practical science. Culturally, the Song dynasty was a golden age of refined thought and art. Neo-Confucianism emerged as the dominant philosophy, blending Confucian ethics with Buddhist and Taoist metaphysics. This school of thought shaped Chinese moral values for the next 700 years. Landscape painting, ceramics, calligraphy, and poetry reached extraordinary levels of sophistication. Everyday life became increasingly cultured, with tea drinking, music, theater, and public entertainment flourishing among all classes. Despite its brilliance, the Song faced constant military pressure from powerful northern rivals. The dynasty is divided into two phases: the Northern Song, 960 to 1127, and the Southern Song, 1127 to 1279. The Northern Song lost control of northern China to the Jurchen-led Qing Dynasty after the capital Kaifeng fell in 1127. The imperial court fled south and re-established the dynasty at Hangzhou, marking the start of the Southern Song. In the south, the Song reached new economic and cultural heights, but remained under relentless military threat. Finally, the rising Mongol Empire launched a full-scale invasion. After decades of resistance, the last Song forces were defeated in 1279 at the Battle of Yemen. The final child emperor drowned, marking the end of the dynasty. Though defeated militarily, the Song dynasty reshaped China forever. It created the world's first fully commercial society, pioneered technologies that changed human history, and elevated education and culture to unmatched levels. The Song proved that civilization could shine not only through conquest, but through knowledge, invention, and economic genius. The Yuan dynasty, ruling from 1271 to 1368 CE, marked the first time China was governed by a foreign power. The Mongols, under the leadership of Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. While often viewed as an era of conquest and upheaval, the Yuan dynasty was also a period of cultural exchange, administrative innovation, and unprecedented integration of China into a vast Eurasian empire. It fundamentally transformed Chinese society, governance, and international trade. The foundation of the Yuan dynasty was built upon the Mongol conquests of the 13th century. By the mid-1200s, the Mongols had defeated the Qing dynasty in northern China and gradually conquered the southern Song. In 1271, Kublai Khan formally proclaimed the establishment of the Yuan dynasty, and in 1279 completed the conquest of the south. Uniting all of China under Mongol rule for the first time in centuries, Kublai established his capital at Kunbalik, modern-day Beijing, signaling a permanent shift of political power to the north. The Yuan rulers implemented a hierarchical administration designed to maintain Mongol dominance while managing the Chinese population. Society was stratified into four main classes: Mongols at the top, followed by Central and Western Asians, Northern Chinese, and Southern Chinese at the bottom. Although this system ensured Mongol supremacy, it also facilitated the integration of diverse peoples and cultures into a single imperial framework. Chinese officials were often employed in provincial administration, maintaining some continuity with previous dynasties while under foreign oversight. The Yuan dynasty promoted trade, travel, and cultural exchange like no dynasty before it. The empire stretched across much of Asia, connecting China to Central Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. The famous Venetian traveler Marco Polo visited Yuan China, documenting the empire's wealth, advanced cities, and sophisticated administration. The Mongols established secure trade routes along the Silk Road and supported maritime trade, which enhanced the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across continents. Economically, the Yuan dynasty encouraged agriculture, mining, and handicrafts while introducing new crops such as sorghum and grapes from Central Asia. Paper currency, expanded by the Mongols, facilitated commerce and economic integration, although inflation occasionally caused instability. The government also undertook large-scale infrastructure projects, including the restoration of the Grand Canal, to improve transport and supply lines. Culturally, the Yuan period was notable for blending Chinese traditions with Mongol and foreign influences. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism coexisted, while Persian, Arab, and European influences shaped art, architecture, and scholarship. Drama and literature, including the development of Chinese opera, flourished, leaving a lasting cultural imprint. Despite its achievements, the Yuan dynasty faced significant challenges: corruption, heavy taxation, natural disasters, and peasant uprisings weakened imperial authority. By the mid-14th century, rebellion movements, most famously led by Zhou Yuanzhang, gained momentum. In 1368, Zhou captured Khanbalik, ending Mongol rule in China and founding the Ming dynasty. The Yuan dynasty's legacy is complex. It unified China under foreign rule, expanded international trade and cultural exchange, and demonstrated the possibilities and limits of multi-ethnic empire. Its influence on governance, commerce, and global connectivity would resonate long after its fall. The Ming dynasty, ruling from 1368 to 1644 CE, marked the return of native Chinese rule after nearly a century of Mongol domination under the Yuan. It became one of the most powerful, stable, and culturally confident dynasties in Chinese history. The Ming restored traditional Chinese governance, strengthened imperial authority, expanded global trade, and created some of China's most iconic achievements in architecture, exploration, and culture. The dynasty was founded by Zhou Yunzong, a former peasant monk who rose through rebellion to overthrow the Yuan dynasty. In 1368, he proclaimed himself the Hongwu Emperor and established the Ming capital at Nanjing. Determined to prevent future foreign domination and internal corruption, Hongwu ruled with strict discipline. He eliminated the position of prime minister, concentrating absolute power in the emperor's hands, and reformed land ownership to support peasants and boost agricultural recovery after decades of war. Under the early Ming rulers, China entered a period of strong centralized government and economic revival. Agriculture flourished with improved irrigation and land reforms, while population growth accelerated rapidly. The Ming strengthened the civil service examination system, ensuring that educated officials governed the empire based on Confucian principles of loyalty, morality, and order. The Ming dynasty is globally remembered for its extraordinary maritime expeditions led by the great admiral Zheng He in the early 15th century. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng He commanded massive treasure fleets that sailed across Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the coast of East Africa. These voyages projected Ming power abroad, expanded diplomatic relations, and connected China with dozens of foreign kingdoms. Though not aimed at colonization, these expeditions demonstrated China's unmatched naval strength at the time. The Ming also ruled as masters of monumental construction. The Forbidden City in Beijing, completed in 1420, became the imperial palace and remains one of the greatest architectural complexes in the world. The Great Wall was rebuilt and expanded with stone and brick fortifications to defend against nomadic invasions from the north. These structures symbolized both the grandeur and defensive priorities of the Ming state. Economically, the Ming oversaw a booming global trade network. Chinese silk, porcelain, and tea were in enormous demand across Asia, the Middle East, and later Europe. By the 16th century, European merchants arrived in growing numbers, and vast quantities of silver from the Americas flowed into China, integrating it fully into the emerging global economy. This influx of wealth, however, also created inflation and fiscal instability over time. Despite early strength, the Ming dynasty gradually declined. Court corruption, rising taxation, natural disasters, and military pressure weakened the state. Powerful eunuchs gained enormous influence in politics, undermining competent administration. By the early 17th century, peasant rebellions spread across northern China, while Manchu forces gathered strength beyond the Great Wall. In 1644, rebel forces captured Beijing, and the last Ming emperor took his own life. Shortly afterward, the Manchus entered China and established the Qing Dynasty, ending nearly 3 centuries of Ming rule. The Ming Dynasty left behind a legacy of restored Chinese sovereignty, artistic brilliance, global maritime ambition, and imperial grandeur. It reasserted China's identity after foreign rule and shaped Chinese culture, architecture, and global connections in ways that continue to resonate across history. The Qing Dynasty, ruling from 1644 to 1912 CE, was the final imperial dynasty of China and one of the most dramatic chapters in its long history. Founded by the Manchu people from Northeast Asia, the Qing transformed China into the largest territorial empire it had ever known. Yet it would also witness humiliation by foreign powers, internal rebellions, and the ultimate collapse of the imperial system after more than 2,000 years. The Qing rose after the fall of the Ming dynasty. In 1644, amid rebellions and chaos, Manchu forces crossed the Great Wall, seized Beijing, and established Qing rule. Though foreign in origin, the Qing emperors quickly adopted Chinese traditions, Confucian governance, and imperial institutions to legitimize their authority. The early Qing rulers, especially the Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong emperors, created one of the strongest and most stable periods in Chinese history. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the Qing Empire reached its greatest height. Territorial expansion brought Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Taiwan firmly under imperial control, creating the largest unified Chinese state in history. Population growth exploded, agriculture expanded, and the economy flourished. Art, literature, and scholarship thrived, and the imperial examination system continued to produce elite scholar officials to run the empire. However, beneath this prosperity, new dangers were emerging. By the 19th century, Western powers, especially Britain, forced China into unequal treaties through military strength. The Opium Wars shattered China's isolation, opening its ports to foreign traders and granting Europeans legal privileges on Chinese soil. These humiliations exposed Qing weakness and marked the beginning of what later Chinese historians would call the Century of Humiliation. At the same time, China was rocked by catastrophic internal rebellions. The most devastating was the Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864, led by a religious revolutionary who claimed divine authority. This civil war killed tens of millions and nearly destroyed the Qing state. Other uprisings, combined with corruption and economic distress, drained the dynasty's strength. In response, Qing leaders launched the self-strengthening movement. Attempting to adopt Western technology while preserving traditional Confucian values, modern factories, railways, shipyards, and schools were built, but reforms were slow, uneven, and resisted by conservative elites. Meanwhile, Japan's rapid modernization and defeat of China in the Sino-Japanese War from 1894 to 1895 further shattered Qing prestige. By the early 20th century, revolutionary ideas spread rapidly. Calls for democracy, nationalism, and the end of monarchy grew louder. In 1911, a nationwide uprising known as the Xinhai Revolution erupted. Provinces declared independence one after another, and in 1912, the last Qing emperor, a child named Puyi, was forced to abdicate. The imperial era of China, which had lasted over 2,000 years, came to an end. The Qing dynasty left behind a complex legacy. It created the largest Chinese empire in history and presided over long periods of peace and prosperity. Yet, it also collapsed under the weight of internal decay and foreign domination. The fall of the Qing did not just end a dynasty. It ended the entire imperial system and opened the door to modern China. Across more than 4,000 years of continuous civilization, China's dynasties collectively shaped one of the most enduring and influential civilizations in human history. Each dynasty built upon the foundations of the previous, turning innovation into tradition and adversity into renewal. The earliest dynasties established the core structure of Chinese civilization. The Xia introduced hereditary monarchy. The Shang perfected bronze technology and created the first Chinese writing system, and the Zhou shaped political philosophy through the mandate of heaven and gave birth to Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, ideas that still define East Asian thought. The Qin unified China for the first time, creating a centralized imperial system, standardizing writing, currency, laws, and measurements. The Han transformed this empire into a world power through Silk Road trade, scientific invention, Confucian governance, and cultural unity, forming the permanent identity of the Chinese people. Later eras refined culture and expanded global connections. The Tang created a golden age of poetry, art, diplomacy, and military power, while the Song revolutionized the world with paper money, gunpowder warfare, printing, navigation, and commercial society, centuries ahead of other civilizations. The Yuan integrated China into the largest land empire in history, accelerating global exchange between East and West. The Ming restored Chinese rule and projected maritime power across the oceans through Zheng He's voyages, while building monumental architecture like the Forbidden City and the modern Great Wall. The Qing expanded China to its greatest territorial size, maintained long internal peace, and governed the final chapter of imperial rule. Together, these dynasties created a civilization defined by centralized government, merit-based administration, philosophical depth, technological genius, artistic brilliance, economic strength, and cultural continuity. China's dynastic achievements did not merely shape one nation, they shaped the course of world civilization itself.